Hi guys, long time no homework video, am I right? Goodness. Well, today our homework video is going to be a little bit different than it used to look like. You're not going to take Cornell notes. Instead, we're going to do a little practice with questions about evolution and natural selection. So two topics that you learned about this week. Before we get started, I want you to take your piece of paper that you normally would take notes on. I want you to divide it in half down the middle, so either horizontally or vertically, doesn't matter. And I want you to write question number 1 and question number 2 on it. So, for example, you could easily do this if this was your paper. You could break it like this and write question 1 and question 2. Okay, for each one, you're going to copy the questions for each section and then answer them as you watch. And so the point of this video is I'm going to read the questions and I'm going to help you learn how to work through these questions, because a lot of times on the STAAR test you're going to see these questions about the evolution and natural selection in scenarios. So you're going to see situations with different organisms, different plants, different animals, different bacteria, and you're going to be given a lot of information about them, and you have to sort through it to understand and to find what we've learned in class and how it applies to this scenario. Okay, so we're going to practice that with this video today. Here is question number 1. So why don't you go ahead and copy down questions 1, 2, and 3, and then I will read the question and help you work through it. So go ahead and pause the video and do that now. So the question says, in a forest, there are green beetles and red beetles. The birds that live in the forest prefer the taste of the red beetles over the green beetles. So let's pause for a second and just think about the information the question already gives us. So, in a forest, there are green beetles and red beetles. So, we know that there are 2 types of beetles. And we know that the birds eat these beetles. And it says specifically that the birds prefer the taste of red beetles. So, that means they eat the red beetles more than they eat the green beetles. Okay, so question number 1 says, if this continues, what will happen to the number of red beetles? Well, if the birds prefer the taste of the beetles, they're going to eat more of the red beetles. So, for example, let's say that you really like M&Ms, okay, and you have you specifically like the red M&Ms. Well, if you go through a bag of M&Ms and you eat all the red M&Ms first, what's going to happen? They're going to run out, right? Eventually, they are going to run out first, and you're going to have the orange and the blue and the brown and the green and all the other colors, right? So, if this happens, if the birds only eat the red beetles, what's going to happen to the number of red beetles? Well, I would say that it would decrease and eventually probably disappear. So put that in your own words and write an answer to question number 1. Question number 2 says, what will the population of beetles most likely look like after 4 generations? So if this continues to happen, what is the population of beetles going to look like? Well, we just said that the number of red beetles is going to decrease and maybe even completely go away eventually because the birds are going to eat them all. So what are the beetles going to look like in this forest? If there's no red ones, they're going to be green. And the last one, what adaptation for beetles is most advantageous? So this question, this word, okay, if you look at it carefully, it looks like the word advantage, right? So if someone has an advantage over someone else, I like to think about this as like a soccer game, right? If someone gets a yellow card or a red card, if they get a red card in a soccer game, they get ejected from the game. So they've done something bad, they're getting kicked out of the game, and the team has to play with 1 less player on the field. So it would be 10 people versus 11. Well, the team with 11 people have an advantage. They've got 1 extra player in the field, and that's going to give them an advantage over the other team. So this question is asking you what adaptation in beetles is going to give them an advantage. Which beetle has the advantage? Which one is going to be able to survive more successfully? Its adaptation is helping it survive. So in this question, think about which one is going to be able to survive for longer. Is it the red beetle that the birds are really loving to eat, or is it the green beetle that the birds don't want to eat? So you make up your mind on that, and your teacher will talk with you about it tomorrow in bell work. Okay, so here's question number 2. Feel free to just write down the questions right now. So go ahead and pause the video and just write down those 2 questions. You don't have to write the entire scenario. So question number 2 says, peacocks live in the forests of India, Sri Lanka, and Africa. They live on the ground of the forests among low bushes and trees. Female peacocks are typically a plain brown color. Male peacocks have brightly colored tails that attract females. Number 1, why would plain colored male peacocks be rare in a population? So pay close attention. The question just told you that female peacocks are brown in color, right? So they're that plain brown color. Okay, while on the other hand, the male peacocks are usually brightly colored. So they get that like beautiful blue tail to them, okay? So they're kind of asking you the opposite. They're saying, then why do you think males who have plain or brown colored tails, why would they be rare? Well, look back up at the scenario. It tells you that these bright colored tails attract females. The ladies like the brightly colored tails. Okay, so if the female peacocks like these brightly colored tails, they're not going to want to mate with the plain colored male peacocks. Sad day for them. So, unfortunately, those plain-colored male peacocks are not going to reproduce. They're not going to have babies, and their genes in the population are eventually going to disappear because they're not passing them on to their offspring. So, they're rare because they don't reproduce often. And if there's no females to reproduce with, they're not going to have very many babies, and they're not going to continue. So, why would they be rare? Because they are not favored by the female peacocks, and they're not going to pass on their genes. They're not going to have as many offspring. So maybe think on that for a second, put it in your own words, and answer the question. So number 2 says, think about the role of the female peacock. So stop for a second and think about, what does the mom peacock do, right? Mom peacock is the one that's in charge of protecting babies, protecting the baby peacocks. So why would a brown female peacock be more fit for its environment than a brightly colored female peacock? Okay, so why would a brown peacock have a higher fitness for this environment of the trees and the bushes than a brightly colored female peacock? Well, if the female peacock's job is to protect its babies, right? If its job is to make sure that nothing harms them, if she has brightly colored tails, isn't she going to stick out in the forest? So if a mom peacock has brown feathers and kind of hides in the trees well, she's going to hide her babies well, and she's going to, keep them safe so that they can grow up and then eventually mate and pass on their genes through their offspring and continue the population. So a female peacock is more fit for its environment because it is more likely going to protect and survive and therefore allow its babies to survive than a brightly colored female peacock. A brightly colored peacock, the predators might find it easier, right, and attack it and get the babies. So a brown female peacock is more fit for its environment because it can blend into its environment, to put it simply. So put that in your own words also. And that's the end of the questions. So feel free to go back through these. If anything didn't quite make sense, maybe put a star by it or put a question mark by it and talk with your teacher about it tomorrow. Because if this was difficult to do, that's okay now, but by the time we get to the STAR test, we really got to be able to read these scenarios and answer questions, kind of analyzing them to answer the questions. So good luck and talk with your teachers.